Good morning, my friend. I hope you're doing well. It's about 5:30 in the morning here, and we're getting ready to start another incredible day. Yesterday, we went to church. We go to the Berean Church in North Platte, Nebraska, and the pastor is John Stone, and he's preaching through Hebrews right now, and he spoke out of Hebrews 3:13 yesterday, and the verse is this: "You must warn each other every day while it is still today, so that none of you will be deceived by sin and hardened against God." He puts today in quotes in the verse, the writer of Hebrews. You must warn each other every day while it is still called, quote, today, so that none of you will be deceived by sin and hardened against God. It's kind of a tongue-in-cheek way of saying, hey, you can't wait till tomorrow, because tomorrow, guess what? It's going to be today, and the day after that, it's going to be today. So that's why I'm always saying you start today. Like whatever it is that you need to square away in your life, whether it's mind change march or giving up some habit that's hurting you, or some relationship that's sinful, or deciding to, get closer to the Lord, or getting in shape, or doing whatever it is, getting your financial house in order, whatever it is that your heart is, that the Spirit is telling you. Or if you're not saved, if it's that tug at your heart that Jesus is saying, hey, are you tired of trying to do life on your own? Are you tired of trying to make this happen all by yourself? It's time to start today. That's why I always say, hey, don't put it off till tomorrow. You can't change your life until you change your mind. So I thought it'd be fun in the light of that, since the pastor was talking about starting today, and Hebrews is talking about starting today, and I'm always talking about starting today, I thought it'd be fun to go back to episode 1, the very first podcast I ever recorded way back in 2014. It was, less than a year after we lost our son Mitch, and I started writing, and I'd started blogging and all that, and the podcast kind of naturally sprang out of this little community of bereaved and hurting people that were kind of gathering around to say, hey, what do we do next? How do we find the light again? How do we move forward? And I just decided I was going to start a podcast. And back in those days, it was terrible. The audio quality is not very good. I think I had 6 downloads. I think Lisa downloaded it 3 times, and maybe my mom and my mother-in-law, Patty, and maybe somebody else. There were a tiny number of downloads on those early episodes. But for some reason, God just said, hey, keep doing it, keep going. This is going to matter to somebody someday. And the Bible says the Lord does not despise small beginnings. In those days, I didn't even know how to edit. So whenever I made a mistake, I would just re-record the whole episode. I probably recorded that 15-minute episode 1 5 times. I literally was terrified. I was nervous. I didn't know what I was doing. I felt silly. The enemy was telling me that it was dumb, that, nobody's going to listen to this, and it doesn't matter. And now look at it. I mean, we're downloaded in 77 countries last month, or all around the world. 35,000 people, or I shouldn't say that, 35,000 episodes were downloaded last month. It might have been Lisa downloading it 35,000 times. I don't know. But there's certainly, the numbers have grown, and people are listening. And the reason that people are listening, I hear from you all the time. I got another beautiful email from a woman named Kara yesterday. Great story, powerful story of what the Lord's doing in her life. And basically the bottom line is we're just giving each other some notes on how to find hope in a dark world, right? We're giving each other some ways to change the way you think about the things that are happening, because they're going to keep happening, right? So if you're going to have to go through some things, you might as well think about it in a way that's productive and not in a way that's harmful to yourself. That's what I jokingly call self-brain surgery, but it's not really a joke, because when you learn how to think about your thinking and change the things you're thinking about and take control of them, you literally improve your brain chemistry, right? Your brain gets better at making better decisions, and you have less likelihood of falling off a cliff. And that's what this whole thing's about. So we're going to play episode 1 of the old You Start Today podcast, just for historical purposes, so you can have it. It's been offline for a while, except for the patrons. And by the way, we have a great group of around 40 people that are financially supporting the podcast, and they've defrayed the cost of this online venture that we're doing by almost half now for the podcast side. It's inexpensive to extend your reach across the world. It just costs money, so people are helping. And if you're interested in helping support this mission, there's 2 ways to do it. You can do a one-time support at wlewarnmd.com/support, or you can become an ongoing monthly patron of the podcast. It's patron.podbean.com/Dr. Lee Warren, patron.podbean.com/Dr. Lee Warren. And those are ways that you can support, join the work. It's not a nonprofit entity. I haven't taken the steps to make it a nonprofit, so you can't write it off. We'll do that eventually if it gets big enough to justify the cost. But it just defrays the cost a little bit. It's pretty expensive, like I said, to do this. And if you just feel compelled to partner with us and help us grow, the proof's in the pudding. It's grown from around 5,000 downloads a month starting in around 2019, 2020. It started growing. And then when we switched to Podbean and really made this available, we've gone from 5, 6, 7, 9, 10,000 now to in the 30,000 downloads a month every month. And so it's growing, and people are getting aware of the podcast and what's happening. If you feel like it's something you want to do, join us, patreon.podbean.com/Dr. Lee Warren or wleewarrenmd.com/support. That's enough of that. Without further ado, my friends, sorry, I've got this frog in my throat for 2 days now. I can't quite clear. Probably because I've been on the tractor hauling dirt all around the property for the last couple of days. Probably just allergies, right? But while it's still today, we're going to go back and play episode 1 of the old You Start Today podcast, and then I'm going to hit you with one of my favorite worship songs, Paul Baloche. He actually released this song, I think, in 2009. Today is the Day. Just a great upbeat worship song to get you started for today. We'll be back with Tuesdays with Tata tomorrow. Love you, thinking about you. wleewarrenmd.com/prayer is the prayer wall. Join us in praying with and for people all around the world. And don't forget, while it is still today, to start today. You Start Today, the Dr. Lee Warren Podcast, episode 001, The Secret to Real Life Change. In today's conversation, I will give you the one true secret to changing your life. If you want to become healthier, feel better, and be happier, stay with me. Trust me, I'm a brain surgeon. Get the text of this show and all the links I mention at www.youstarttoday.com/001. Welcome to You Start Today, the Dr. Lee Warren Podcast, where we're developing a community of people learning together to become healthier, feel better, and be happier. If you want to experience real life change, you start today. Congratulations on being here. Since you're listening, it means that you've decided you need to change something in your life. I can help. Let me introduce myself. I'm Dr. Lee Warren, and I'm a writer and a real-life neurosurgeon. You can check me out on my website, wleewarrenmd.com, or on my Amazon author page. Now, in the course of my job as a neurosurgeon, I take care of people during some of the worst times in their lives. My patients are dealing with deadly diseases, chronic pain, or injuries that limit their lives in a variety of different ways. Some of them have medical issues that require surgery or other kinds of treatments that I prescribe, and I'm grateful and honored to be able to provide for them during their time of need. But I started this podcast for a group of people who need a different kind of help. That group includes all of us. And yes, that means you. All of us, if we're honest, want the same three things. We want to become healthier, feel better, and be happier. I'm shooting at the same targets as everyone else. You might say, no, Lee, what I want is to lose weight, or I want to grow my business or improve my marriage. And I would counter that all of those specific things fall under the big three targets that I mentioned before. We all want to become healthier, feel better, and be happier in our lives. If we're honest with ourselves, we can admit that many times we don't make changes because we're afraid that if we try, we might fail. And sometimes we give into a pattern of negative thought that amplifies our fears and produces an almost gravitational field around us that guarantees we'll never be able to move an inch. If you're there, if you're stuck in that place, I want to help. When I meet a patient who feels stuck in some area of their life, when they feel that a particular issue is insurmountable, a given problem is unsolvable, or a goal is unattainable, I know one thing for sure. They need brain surgery. Now, I don't mean flesh and blood brain surgery. What I've learned is that if you want to accomplish real life change, you have to start by changing some things under the hood, in between your own ears. And that's where I come in. In this podcast, I'll introduce you to something I like to call brain surgerization. That sounds funny. I say brain surgerization because I want to separate that from real flesh and blood brain surgery. And I know it sounds funny, but this is important, so pay attention. Before we go any further, I feel like I need to share some things with you. You see, I'm not coming to you here from a place of having this thing called life all figured out. In fact, far from it. I started this podcast because in my own life, in my personal life, I had some things going on, and I realized that I needed to become healthier, feel better, and be happier. And I wanted to develop a community of people to walk those paths with me. You see, I've been through 3 of the hardest things you can encounter in life. I've been to war, I've been through a divorce, and I've lost a child. My experiences in the Iraq War left me with some scars and a years-long battle with post-traumatic stress disorder. You can read about that in my memoir, No Place to Hide, a brain surgeon's long journey home from the Iraq War. My divorce was difficult, and if you've ever been through a divorce, you know what I mean. It's not easy. Even when it's necessary, divorce hurts everyone involved, and it changes your whole life. And less than a year ago, we lost a child. Without question, this has been the most difficult period of time in my entire life. Simple decisions for most of us became impossible to make, like the decision to go back to work, to try to get back into a normal life so we could do normal things like take care of our other children and not lose our business became almost insurmountable. These necessary things that had to be done seemed impossible in the context of having lost a child. So when I tell you that I've learned some secrets about real life change and how to become healthier, feel better, and be happier, that's where I'm coming from. I'm coming in this podcast from a place no one should have to go, but from which I've emerged by the grace of God, alive and stronger, and with a simple message for you. The message: you really can survive this life. You can have real life change. In fact, from what I've figured out so far, there's only one secret to becoming healthier, feeling better, and being happier. What's the secret? This is the thing people have spent millions, possibly billions of dollars trying to find. They've sought out mountaintop gurus and therapists and mentors. They've bought books and programs, attended seminars, all searching for this one little secret. And since I promised to share it with you, I'll go ahead and give it to you now. The secret to real life change: you start today. That's it. That's the secret to changing your life. You start today. I know it doesn't sound very profound, but trust me on this. I am a brain surgeon. If you don't start today, you never will. Hear me here. If you don't start today, every one of your tomorrows will still hold insurmountable issues, unsolvable problems, and unattainable goals. You will never lose those 30 pounds. You'll never quit that 2-pack per day habit, and you'll never improve your marriage or go back to school or whatever else it is that's hurting you and limiting your life. If you don't start today, every today will feel just like every yesterday. And every yesterday will be a vast field of unfinished projects, unhealed sorrows, unfulfilled promises. And the person you see in the mirror will remind you less and less of who you always hoped you'd someday become. If you don't start today, You never will. Because tomorrow is a lie. Tomorrow is a later version of your current reality, unless you start today. When I hit the wall with my PTSD, when the nightmares spilled over into the daytime, when every helicopter I heard overhead put me back in Iraq, when every loud noise made me feel like I was being mortared again, when the blood and the smells and the screams of dying Marines and burned babies came right back into my brain without warning, something had to give. I made a decision. I was going to write about it, talk about it, and with Lisa's help, actually with her insistence, I chose my today, and I started healing. Now, I'll be honest with you. Life hasn't stopped throwing bombs at me. A divorce and a lost son brought different kinds of war into my life. And I survived by choosing my today and trying to make every day one in which I could be proud of my own yesterday. When you start today, every victory, even tiny ones, guarantee that tomorrow will feel different. Tomorrow will feel more hopeful. It'll feel like things are going to be okay. And guess what? It all starts under the hood. You see, in between your ears lies the greatest supercomputer in the history of the world. Almost 1 trillion cells, intricately designed into a 3-pound organ that programs and determines everything about who you are, what you believe, how you think, and what you feel. And that machine, your brain, is in most ways under your control. Now, I'll give you a disclaimer here. Some problems are medical, and to solve them, you need a doctor. But many of the problems we face in life can be improved or overcome by changing our thinking. There's a great book by Dr. Daniel Amen called Change Your Brain, Change Your Life. And I would recommend that you read it if you want to understand how things that we do, how we eat, what we drink, substances we take, things that we think about, change the way our brain actually functions and therefore determine how we live, how we think, how we feel, and how we act and react. Change Your Brain, Change Your Life. It's a book you should read by Dr. Daniel Amen. In future episodes of this podcast, we will discuss the ways that we can improve our brain chemistry and therefore improve our lives by focusing on positive things, developing better thought patterns, and avoiding toxic mental habits and behaviors. And we will together explore how learning to start today will help us conquer our fears, overcome our hurts, and achieve our goals of becoming healthier, feeling better, and being happier. Now, before our next episode, I want you to do 4 things for me. Number 1, identify something you need to change in your life but haven't known how. 2, think of the mental conversations that you typically have with yourself about these needed changes. 3, make a decision to start today working to change those thought patterns. 4, send me an email. Tell me what's going on, what you're thinking about, how you feel about this podcast, and what decision that you've made. And I'll write you back. I'll hold you accountable. And together we can develop a community of people who are trying to figure this thing out, trying to accomplish real-life change. Make your decision. Change your life. Start today. You can do it. It's not brain surgery. On the next episode of You Start Today, the podcast, we will look under the hood and learn how to brain surgerize our thought patterns and take control of them. Now, go check out my website for helpful resources and information. I write blog posts about similar topics. I want you to sign up for my weekly newsletter. In the newsletter, which comes out on Sundays, you get my best writing. You get things that the blog visitors don't get. And we discuss all kinds of things about real life change. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast feeds. Do it now. Don't forget. Start today. And then come back next time for episode 2, Brain Surgerize Your Life. I'm Dr. Lee Warren. Thanks for listening to You Start Today, the podcast, where together we're learning to become healthier, feel better, and be happier. Go out and make your life better. I'll see you next week. You've been listening to You Start Today, the Dr. Lee Warren podcast, where we're developing a community of people learning together to become healthier, feel better, and be happier. Visit my website, wleewarrenmd.com, sign up for my weekly newsletter, or look up my author page on amazon.com to check out my books. Don't forget to subscribe to the You Start Today podcast, and come back next week for more You Start Today.
Stand upon your truth.